After some 7 months away, Apex Legends is making its triumphant return to the Iceberg benchmarking suite. Battlefield 2042 didn't overcome its rocky start and is suffering from crushingly low player counts, whereas Apex remains one of the most popular games on Steam. Despite flying slightly in the face of my today's games on yesterday's hardware ethos, the decision to swap Battlefield for Apex was pretty much a no-brainer. So far in 2022, I've tested over a dozen discrete GPUs, most of which I didn't get to try in Apex, and almost all of which I've since sold on. Almost, but not quite all. In order to catch up on some missing data, I've decided to play through a few matches on the graphics cards I've yet to sell, the GeForce GTX 1070 and 980 Ti, and the 4GB Radeon RX 480. Beyond the noble goal of data gathering for the people, however, I have an ulterior motive. You see, the problem I had with Apex Legends is... I really don't like it that much. Testing games is harder than it looks. You might think it's simply about playing games while running a frame counter, and well, yes, that's pretty much the gist of it, but with over a dozen different games on the roster at any one time, it's hard to really get to know them. Many games, especially Battle Royales, take time and effort to get used to, and I'm afraid I don't always get round to it. My experience with Apex is generally joining some random pug, scrambling for gear before almost inevitably getting shot and killed less than a minute after landing, and then either not getting revived or, worse, getting revived and then immediately shot and killed again. You can kinda see how this type of experience doesn't endear itself to people who are just trying to measure the damn frames per second. The purposes of this video then are to test the 3 GPUs in a slightly more in-depth manner than usual, taking in different resolutions and quality settings, different maps and game modes, and in the process hopefully get myself an education in how to play and hopefully enjoy Apex Legends. My test rig is the moderately priced gaming PC running an overclocked Ryzen 5 5600G and 16 gigs of DDR4 3600. I'm not going to faff around with a quad-core setup, but it's fair to say that if you're running an older CPU than this one, you'll probably see lower FPS, especially as it climbs over 100. Playing Apex using the GTX 1070 was a delight. 1080 high settings ran perfectly, averaging over 100 FPS, 1% lows in the mid-80s. Couldn't find a flaw in it. If you have a relatively high-end CPU like a recent 6-core from either brand, you should be able to see similar frame rates. Even stepping up to 1440 high, no settings compromised, maintained a 70 plus average and 1% lows not far below 60. If you want to experience Apex Legends on anything short of a 4K display, I can highly recommend this card. Did I enjoy my time? Well, I wouldn't go that far. Things started as I've come to expect. The first squad I got lumbered with was led by someone with an overabundance of self-belief who decided to drop as early as possible in a crowded area, with predictable results. The second game went much better. I was playing Gibraltar, which is not my usual choice. I got a couple of kills, a couple of revives. Might have had a bit of an embarrassing moment with a zipline, but things generally went fine. Eventually we got outflanked by a couple of groups and finished 5th, but I feel like I did my ancestors proud. Switching to 1440, the third game went almost exactly the same as the first, but the fourth game was much better. Playing as my usual lifeline, I got a few revives, some heals, and even a couple of kills. We finished 8th place, which, given how badly spaced we were for much of the game, I don't think was a bad result, all things considered. So far so good, but it was really the arenas that got me irritated. I'd never tried them before, so I was completely unfamiliar with the maps, and I'm still noob enough to make lots of mistakes. The first match was appalling. I was more of a liability than anything, and things only improved slightly in the second match, wherein I managed to bag a few kills, but we still lost by a wide margin. After taking a moment to calm myself down, I switched out the 1070 for the 980 Ti. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that the older card performed almost as well as the newer model. I dropped the texture resolution setting, naturally. The 980 Ti only has 6 gigs on board compared to the 1070's 8 gigs, but that aside, there was no need for compromise. At 1080 high, once more averages broke 100 FPS and lows stayed above 60. Again, there was enough performance available to turn resolution up to 1440, with quality remaining at high. My first game using the 980 Ti was pretty much the ideal benchmark run for me. For the longest time, basically nothing happened. Eventually, as the ring closed, we inevitably ended up getting into combat, and I went in somewhat gung-ho. I got one kill, but probably ended up wiping my whole squad in the process. Again, we finished in 8th place. The first attempt at 1440 was a familiar story. Someone suggested dropping early, we drop early, we die fast. I don't know why anyone thinks this is a good idea, but then I guess most Apex players aren't running benchmarks. The second attempt was slightly better, one of the squad was miles from the rest of us, and as they got close, they got gunned down. When I went to recover them, sure enough, so did I. Third time being the charm is a lie. Things started pretty well. I got the drop on a couple of guys who'd been attacking one of my teammates at the start of the game, but at the end I'd ended up probably wiping my team yet again. At this point I was getting some of that old familiar frustration. I don't like team games. When I fuck up, I prefer to fuck up in private. Moving back to the arena, the first match went okay. I exercised some uncharacteristic restraint, didn't charge in too often, and we ended up winning with relative ease. The second match was another humiliating defeat, and I don't really want to talk about it. The RX 480 played Apex perfectly well on the whole. The numbers at 1080 low line up with the other cards at 1080 high, and the AMD's 1080 high matches the other cards at 1440. Given that the 480 can be had for as little as half the price on the used market of those other cards, this is a pretty healthy showing. However, on reflection, playing the cards in reverse order of performance wasn't my brightest idea. The 480 decided it had an issue with me changing quality settings between rounds, with the lobby FPS dropping into the teens for no obvious reason, and carrying on that way even after restarting the game. The gameplay itself was fine, but by this point my tolerance for it was wearing thin. The first game was smooth enough, but we ended up in a team of 2 and lasted about a minute and a half before getting annihilated. Game 2 was slightly better, though my team wasn't particularly cohesive and ended up getting picked apart. Game 3 went spectacularly poorly, so I decided I'd had enough battles royale for one day. Switching to arenas, and neither my luck nor my mood were improved. We died about as quickly as it's possible to die in the arena, and I didn't get a single kill or revive. It was at this point I decided I was done trying to make myself enjoy Apex. In conclusion then, these are 3 fine cards for Apex Legends in 2022. If you're in the market for one, my usual caveats apply. The 980 Ti should cost much less upfront than the 1070, as it consumes about 100 watts more power, and depending on where you live, that will probably make the 980 Ti the more expensive card after less than a year of gameplay. The 1070 would be my personal choice, but if you're on a budget or happen to have one lying around, the RX 480 is an excellent 1080 low high refresh card and can even be a sturdy choice for 1080 high. Have I fallen in love with Apex? No I haven't. My main issue remains that the game is squad only. I can deal with feeling like I'm playing badly when I'm solo, hence why I'm less annoyed by Fortnite and Warzone. Put me in a team though, and I feel obliged to put more effort in, and then I start to get annoyed when I make my usual dumb decisions, can't see my enemies, or just plain don't know what I'm doing. I'll continue benchmarking Apex on graphics cards until at least the end of the year. My next review is coming on Friday, and that should be for a card you don't see much of on the internet. If you appreciate the great personal sacrifices I make for your entertainment, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.